AI.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to today's webinar. I'm Josh Jones, and today's topic is technical recruitment, trends, predictions, and 2025 strategic planning. Today, we are joined by an incredible group of humans. We've got Amy Wood, Adam Kovacs, and Gus Brewer. Please note the chat feature, as always, at the right-hand side of your screen. This is a great place to engage with each other, with speakers, with content. However, if you want to ask a question, please use the Q&A tab so that we can find that quickly. Today's webinar is being recorded, and by the end of the day today, you will receive an email from us with a link to the playback. Before we get started, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to CoderPad. CoderPad enables talent acquisition practitioners, hiring managers, to screen and interview software engineers with realistic coding assessments and live pair programming interviews. Their engaging assessments and intuitive coding environment create a superior candidate experience that keeps developers engaged, while at the same time ensuring you're able to evaluate candidates based on their true skills and hire only best fit talent. Thank you, CoderPad, for making today's presentation possible. Amy is going to be our moderator today. I'm going to hand things over to you. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to be watching from the audience. If you need anything at all, just let me know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joshua. All right, everyone. My name is Amy Wood, and I currently run recruiting operations at Anthropic. And a little bit of history on me. I grew up as an IC recruiter, started in agency world, spent about a decade at HubSpot doing tech recruiting, ran their global tech recruiting team. Spoiler alert before I handed the reins over to Gus, who you will meet shortly. And since then, I've been doing a couple startups. I was at Gem, OneTrust, and most recently Anthropic. So that's a little bit about me. And I will pass it over to Gus for an intro.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. So yeah, as Amy spoiled, Amy was my boss at HubSpot for a few years. And then she set me up to run tech recruiting there, where I did that for the last few years there. Currently work at Alchemy, which is a Web3 development platform where I run tech recruiting here and helping them grow. So I'll hand it over to Adam.
Hey, thank you. I did not work for Amy. But hi, everyone. My name is Adam Kovacs, and these days I call myself a fractional talent and people leader and the founder of the Talent Foundation. There I mostly specialize in helping high-growth companies scale their organizations through talent enablement, where I focus mostly on talent intelligence and market research, a lot of recruiter education in today's world, especially with the AI-enabled world, and overall optimizing talent acquisition operations for my client companies.
All right. Thank you, Adam and Gus. Shall we get into some questions?
Let's do it.
All right. So we are getting into planning season right now, which is everyone's favorite season. We are all likely hyper-focused on ensuring our teams are set up for success. So in your point of view, and maybe Adam, I'll start with you, where should tech hiring teams allocate budget in 2025 to make sure they're staying competitive?
I know that this session is all about tech assessments and tech hiring, but one thing that I would say when allocating budget, one thing to highlight is recruiter education. You can have a lot of technical assessing tools. You can know all the market intelligence that you have. You can have access to all the fancy and latest best tools ever. But from an operational standpoint, if your workforce is not enabled to utilize the tools available for them, then you can get, and please take this with the best intentions, and I'll just use it as an analogy, but you can give a caveman the most precise instrument, they will use it as a hammer. So recruiter education and recruiter enablement, so they know what tools are available and how to use it and how to maximize their ROI, because I think we see that with all the tools out there, especially in TA tech, is that there are two types of users: ones that are scratching the surface and ones who try to go deeper. kind of like give the sourcing example of, there are people who just type in the title and run a search and hope for the best, and there are ones who get way more sophisticated, and the ROI and the return on those actions will be very, very different. So I would definitely highlight recruiter education.
I love that, especially coming from a rec ops function, right? That's a huge part of my role. So I love that. Gus, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, Adam, I think that's a great call out. And one I'm definitely thinking about for my own team now that you say it. I think the other things to really think about are around tooling. We're going to talk a lot about tooling today, but like finding the tools that work best for you, whether they are AI or not, whether they're taking time off of your recruiter's hands, whether they're taking time off your coordinator's hands, taking time off your sourcer's hands, or your hiring manager, interviewer's hands, right? Like, where can you invest some time to give people time back? In the evaluation process and the interviewing process, I think is critically important. And like, there's so many out there that you're never going to be able to try them all or give everyone what they want, but like pick one or two and just get started and try to make yourself a little bit more efficient and try to give your team a little bit of time back in their day, whether it's with calendar automation or scheduling automation or sourcing automation, like literally anything and everything. I think it's really important to start somewhere on the tooling side of things. I think the second piece, and like, I don't think this is like necessarily super controversial, but like with the kind of talent market being the way it is right now, like we're doing a lot of thinking about bringing on like part-time talent and fractional talent and different talent that doesn't always look the same as full-time employees. And like, that's good and bad for the talent market as a whole, especially in the recruiting space. But I think it's really critical from like a business perspective to look at how you can support your team with extra headcount in a non-traditional way. And that's something we're thinking about here at Alchemy right now, especially, we're in a little bit of a more kind of like volatile industry in crypto and blockchain. So like trying to make sure that like we can kind of like scale up and scale down as we need and as the space is kind of calling for.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think like something you're touching on, which is I think hugely valuable, is the idea of just like piloting and testing, right? And trying things out, see what works. Not everything has to be a huge commitment. And I love that from a tooling perspective. And then like the elasticity of your teams, right? We're all thinking about growth a little bit different than we used to. And what does that look like to make sure that we're adjusting and like basically growing and contracting with the needs of the business, right? So I love that. Thank you. Thinking about AI, how should organizations balance their investment in technology, specifically AI tools, versus thinking about talent retention or candidate experience or some of the other like really big bucket topics that we're used to paying attention to?
I can start this one. I think that at the end of the day, from my perspective, like experience and the candidate's experience is ultimately always going to be the thing that makes people join your company, right? They're not going to be wowed by some AI tool or wowed by something that was like done by a computer. More so, they're going to be wowed by the great talent that you have in your organization. So like to completely write those things off would be a little bit short-sighted. However, like you have to, like I said earlier, you have to invest in these spaces. You have to find the tools that make your teams more efficient. You have to find ways to leverage these tools. And we'll talk a lot about this throughout the webinar today, like different ways to find efficiencies and how to actually like think about AI tooling as part of your toolkit instead of something that you should fight against. But at the end of the day, like you probably should be prioritized. If your candidate experience is not great, like prioritize that over any AI tools first, right? Like you have to improve that. If you're not doing well at attracting and evaluating the talent that you're kind of getting as an organization, like you have to prioritize those tools first. And like as great as AI is, it's not going to solve that today. Maybe in the future, but not today. And that's still the work that has to be done on the ground from your recruiting team, your recruiting ops teams, your coordinators, your sourcers, your recruiters, et cetera.
Adam, what do you think?
I think the answer to this question depends on the type of hiring that you're doing. If you're doing, so let's start with the candidate experience, like definitely most important, right? But how do you influence that? If you're doing some sort of, let's say, low touch, high volume type of hiring where your growth is driven mostly through recruiter marketing and applications. So let's say it's mostly inbound. Think about gains in the process and automations in the process, because you can have 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 applicants coming into a very good job in the matter of sometimes minutes or hours, right? So before you even get to assessing them, you cannot get enough recruiters and resume screeners to go and look at all of them and look at all the profiles, get back to all the profiles, give some sort of feedback, at least acknowledge the application, all those things. So if you're doing something that is sort of low touch from a human standpoint and it's easily automatable, invest into that to improve the candidate experience. On the other side, if you're doing something that is very high touch, very white glove type of approach where the human involvement is the added value. It's not the smooth process, it's the actual human face-to-face involvement, being able to talk to candidates, the candidates being able to talk to recruiters, ask questions, all that. If that sort of recruiting is what you're doing, then think about efficiency on the recruiter end. Think about time savings. Think about force multipliers. Sometimes it's the easy stuff of automating scheduling, automating sometimes easy stuff, right? Like follow-up emails and all those stuff, automating profile summaries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like think about solutions that legitimately force multiply. We say that like, oh, with AI now, one person will be able to do the 10-person team's job. That's true, but be very, very critical about your process and see where can you actually do that and what sort of tools actually enable that 10x efficiency performance from your recruiters.
Yeah.
And just one quick thing to add, and Adam, like just to make sure I like crystallize the point, like the AI can add to your candidate experience, like to your point around those high volume ones. Like right now, there's so many candidates out there that like we probably just give a really crappy experience to, and we could give a better experience to with some of this tooling and with some of these like kind of with just like putting a little bit more thought and upfront like kind of experience around. And I think that's such a really good, that's just such a great point.
I think so much of like what we care about as recruiting leaders is making sure our recruiters are spending time doing what they do best, right? Which is just spending time in the funnel talking to candidates, which then, kind of turns into a really positive candidate experience and that human element. So I think touching on like, how do we actually enable them to do that work is a really good kind of summary and path forward. I love that.
And one thing to add over there, if you think about the knock-on effects of all of these things, I know that it's easy to hire. Unfortunately, it's very, very easy to hire a good recruiter in today's market because a lot of good people are unfortunately out of a job. But you need to care about the folks that you already have. So think about retention. Think about happiness in your talent acquisition organization and in your people organization. If you enable your people to do the job that they like and not spend time with the tasks that they dislike, then I'm pretty sure that helps with retention, that helps with job satisfaction and overall happiness in the organization. Like nobody wants to leave their job in today's market, but it's still better to build an organization where people want to go to do the work because they enjoy being over there and they don't, wake up every morning saying like, oh, I need to like reply to 150 other people. Oof, I need to do this. Oof, I need to do that. So think about the knock-on effects that are a lot of times just not quantitative data. It's just qualitative, anecdotal feedbacks that can improve from your own workforce.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, as we know, the market can shift really quickly, right? So what you may be assuming is just a kind of relatively happy workforce right now could turn pretty unhappy if the market switches, right? So it's important to be like kind of always re-recruiting your employees, and especially your talent org. And they're the face of your business, right? You need them to be happy to do their jobs well at the end of the day. All right, I'm going to switch us over a little bit to starting to think about skill-based hiring. So the data is showing us that 40% of recruiters hire developers without academic degrees, and only 20% have strict degree requirements. I think we've all seen variations of this in different scenarios. I would love to hear, maybe Adam, starting with you, how you think about skill-based hiring becoming a little bit more mainstream and, less reliant on kind of the typical degrees that we've seen in the past.
Meaty topic. First of all, thanks God that we are moving away from hardcore degree requirements in jobs that don't actually need it, especially in jobs where your education becomes outdated and obsolete basically by the time you finish it. So thankfully, we're moving that way. But talking about skills, we throw in hard skills, soft skills. I sort of disagree with the soft skill label because those are not soft skills. I think those are just hard to measure skills, but they are also hard skills at their core. So when thinking about this sort of things, I think hiring organizations need to take a step back, and before they think about, okay, what skills do we need and all that, they need to think about what problems do we need to solve over here, and work backwards from that of, okay, we need to solve this sort of projects, this sort of problem. For that, we need people who are proficient in X, Y, and Z. In order to be proficient in that, you need to have A, B, and C skills. And when you go into those, because skills, and especially soft skills, are hard to measure, one thing that I advise is to hiring organizations is to think about behavior. Think about how would a perfect employee, the perfect workforce, behave in this situation, and how would they approach this problem in real life. So instead of doing algorithmic tests sometimes and asking questions of what's the correct answer, A, B, or C, look for ways to mimic the environment and the problem and see how does your potential future talent behave and approach the situation there, and measure the skills there, like measure what sort of skills that they present over there. And one other thing that I think you need to do is, skills are not binary. I don't think that they are like you either have them or you don't have them. Like everything is on a scale. So as a hiring team, think about how does good look like in real life, and look for those, because there is this notion of, will you hire the first good person? Will you hire the best person? Will you hire the best available person? It will vary situation to situation, but if you don't know how does that look like, you won't be able to measure it. So first, try to sit down and think deeply about what do you actually need, and don't behave badly where you just copy paste your previous job description and previous assessment process for that and hope that it works right now.
100%. A couple of things I really like that you said. I want to add one quick thing too, is like, I really like that you put a lot of this focus on the hiring managers too. I think this often gets kind of like thrown onto recruiting as something that we need to figure out and like, tell me how this should be done, right? Wherein, like, to your point, it's like, how do we work backwards from what we actually need, what define those skills, and then really actually like dig in as a recruiting team. And that's where we partner with you to actually figure out a way to measure those skills and evaluate those skills in a meaningful way. And so like really working in partnership with your hiring manager is super critical there. I think the second thing that I want to add on to that is also like, not only what your organization is going to look like now, but what your organization is going to look like in 12 months or in 24 months after you hire this person. And like, I think, at Alchemy, sometimes we get caught in this problem where it's like, we need a staff engineer to do this thing right now. Like, can't possibly have anybody less senior than an L6 doing this, right? It's like, okay, but what if we hired an L5 who could grow into an L6, right? What if we hired a senior or even a mid-career person who could grow into a senior engineer? What does that mean for the organization? And can we do that really well too? And I think that like when you actually can break it down into those types of conversations and push your hiring managers to think about like, well, what do you do with an L6 when they want to get to an L7? What do you do with that person when they want to be a principal engineer? Next thing you know, we have 10 of them in the organization and we don't have enough work to go around for those people. And so really even thinking critically about like, the long-term vision and health of your organization too, when you're bringing in different seniority levels, different skill sets, all those types of things is critical, not just thinking about it as like a static thing in time.
I would like to add one thing. We survived until the 20th minute without mentioning it. AI. I think when it's about skills, we also need to think about skills that are core skills of the candidate and skills that can be augmented by using some sort of AI-enabled tool. And as an organization, I think everyone needs to think about that, again, very deeply, because a lot of times I see organizations think that AI usage is cheating, which is weird for me, because when we talk about talent and assessing talent, if they use AI, they are cheating. When we talk about enabling our workforce, it's like, oh, let's give AI to our workforce so we 10x them, right? So you need to connect those two dots somehow, and you need to bring that approach that you have with your workforce to enable them. You need to bring that approach to your candidates as well. Like, what sort of AI usage do you approve of? To what level? How do you measure that? Do you measure AI usage proficiency, right? Like, think about those things, because you don't want to be in a situation where, let's say you do a tech assessment and turns out that the candidate just asks Claude or ChatGPT or one of the specialized models to write the script or the code for solving the question. Is that good or bad? I won't answer that. I think that answering that is up to every organization. But do you allow that, right? And if you allow it, how do you differentiate between candidates who use it or who don't use it? Do you even want to hire candidates who don't want to use AI or cannot use AI? I think those are hard questions, especially what Gus said of thinking ahead, 12 months, 24 months. Let's not forget, new foundational models will come up in the next quarters, right? Like, everyone is gearing up for the next models to come out. What you see AI right now is the worst that it ever was. And it will probably get exponentially better in the next 6 to 12 months. Think about that. Hire for the future, don't hire for yesterday.
Absolutely. The analogy I often use with hiring managers when they're not doing that is that scene in The Office where Michael is trying to adopt a child and Pam says, well, it's going to take a couple of years. And he says, well, I don't even know if I want a child in a couple of years. And that, I think, is exactly the thing that we're talking on, which is just it's not just what you have to do today, it's what you have to do in the future. And I love that so much. So let's talk a little bit more specifically. What investments or what actions are needed by recruiting to take to really roll out effective skill-based hiring frameworks? I heard a little bit of this, like there was I think Gus, you mentioned a little bit about just thinking about like maybe an assessment, or Adam, like thinking about like a take-home problem that you're basically like replicating the work that you would be doing. What other types of things do you actually put into your process to build upon this?
Yeah, good question. I think it comes back to like from me at the beginning to what Adam said earlier. Like, one, we have to educate our recruiters on what tools they have available to them to do this better, right? So that we can then go and educate the hire managers in that partnership kind of area there, where they're coming to us with their information and we're coming to them with our expertise. And so how do we figure out like what actually fits into that area where we can actually like go and evaluate those skills really effectively? And it's both like kind of this the intangible like evaluation, like manager training around like interviewing style, right, and behavioral questions and anecdotal feedback and STAR methodology and all those types of things, where it's like, cool, this is something that as an internal team we have to build and actually go and coach our people on and actually go and work with them to help them understand like these behavioral kind of like characteristics that we're looking for within an interviewing process, right? And I think on the other side of things, right, we're talking about like the technical side of things, the technical evaluation side of things. And one of the things Adam said earlier around like, cool, thank goodness we're going away from like coding challenges and algorithm, like strictly algorithmic things, and more towards like really skill-based assessment of technical skills, which I think is a really critical point. And like finally we're getting this, like, or we're starting to get to that point. And you see a ton of different tools out there that are really like talking about like technical communication or how do you communicate with a teammate around like different priorities within a specific project? You're seeing tools that are coming out that are actually measuring this in a meaningful way beyond just like, oh, cool, they wrote the code and it works and it runs in this system. It actually like can actually talk to them about like, oh, cool, this is how they would talk to a product manager on the team, or this is how they interface with designer. These are the design decisions that they're making. Or actually able to measure that along the way versus like a whiteboard that gets erased after an interview in the past. And so like really thinking about like how do you invest in those types of tools that have this like a good coder pad that has this kind of staying power where you can look back at the end of the interview and see how did the person do? What actually happened in that interview? What was the diagram that they drew? And like what was the feedback that we got based on that specific thing? And how can we compare it across a number of different people? And so like kind of separating the two things out, right? Like what skills are you trying to get out? Are they technical or are they like kind of intangible, like, you know, these hard, soft skills that Adam talked about? And then what are the things they need to put in place as a team to go and actually like help people get better at evaluating those? Those could be tool based, but it could just be like your good old fashioned training based stuff that you need to do with your managers internally.
I'll drop in something that is less trendy, but I think it should be there for everyone. Scorecards everywhere. When you define, early on, we talked about like skills, what's needed, what's not, how do you define good? But as I was saying, skills are not like, it's rare that they are like binary yes, no type of decisions. So create scorecards for everyone and everything involved in your hiring process that defines how does good, exceptionally good, good enough, and not so good look like, or use whatever labels you have. And this will help not just your interviewer team, not just your recruiters in doing more proficient and running more proficient hiring processes, but these things could feed information and data for your future hiring needs. Like think about action plans for what do you do with the folks who were close but not close enough? How do you reactivate them? How do you revisit them? When do you revisit them? What strategy do you do? Like we can, take the post-assessment process to talent pool management in the future and all that. But think about scorecards, because applying scorecards feeds a lot of qualitative data and like written feedback into your whole process at all stages. And those are very, very, very valuable data points for the future. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel 6 months from now, 12 months from now, when we got some headcount extensions, like we need to hire 53 more of that. Do you know who were the 2 dozens who were close enough? No clue. Do you know how does even close enough look like? No clue. Imagine if you had scorecards.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think one more thing I would add into this is thinking about like the competencies and just completing the circle of the employee life cycle, right? Because we have this data really typically in our HR departments around like, what do we value as competencies when you're in the role, right? We have job ladders, we have career ladders, we have performance reviews, we have all sorts of things. How do you pull that out and actually pull that to the top of your process? Because those two things like naturally tend to be disjointed. And we may be evaluating on some skill set that like, frankly, is maybe not the most important thing when you get into the role, and, vice versa. So how do you make sure there's like a throughput to that as well? Adam, to your point, like how do we measure all of that, right? And make sure we're giving that information back to recruiting at the top. So yeah, that's really helpful.
And not just measure, validate, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of times we think that hiring assessments, doing good assessments is a recruiting or hiring manager's job, right? My question to everyone who is using tech assessments is, did you complete your own assessment? Did you got your whole team to complete that assessment? Does it correlate? If not, then you have a problem. If it just correlates, you still have a problem, because there should be causation, right? So validate all those things and, do some self-reflection, organizational self-reflection. And you say that like, oh, we need this and that skills to run this beautiful organization. Do you actually have them right now? if your organization is running well, right? Do you actually need those skills? Do you need those at that level? So yeah, it's self-reflection, and audits are always good, because being very vocally self-critical, it's not about poking holes of like, this is wrong, that's not working, this is bad in organization. No, those are all exceptionally good opportunities for growth and enablement and creating a hiring flywheel that is just way more efficient than what you ever imagined.
Yeah, I love that approach. And that's actually, I think, something we hear frequently from engineers, which is like, all right, I'm going to take this code test. It's going to be a bunch of leak code, and I'm not actually going to be using this in my day-to-day job. So like, it's frustrating all around, right? So I don't know if either of you have kind of heard that before. I know, Gus, I remember at HubSpot, like there was a scenario where like when we would do a new question, like the engineers would actually take it and test it out and like prove validation around that. But I don't know if either of you want to pull on that thread at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like pretty well known, or at least in my tech circles around, like people hate leak code questions, right? Like they just don't want to do them. Everyone's trying to get around them and do them better. And people like right now at Alchemy, we're literally thinking about building our own kind of like take home assessment or buying a third party solution. And like at the end of the day, the goal is just to get better fidelity on figuring out how they're actually going to perform in the job, right? When they get here. And like, so what are the things that we need to do? And like, it isn't merge two lists, right? It isn't write a binary tree of something, right? It's actually going in and refactoring code, or like pair programming, or doing a technical retro on a project that you've done in the past, or again, communicating within teams around technical, concepts and how you like scope out a longer term project, right? And so like, again, really back to like the original point around scoping out these skills, like what are you actually looking for? Are you looking for them to be able to like write code in Python and get it done in a random editor? Or are you actually looking for them to like know how to do things really effectively that are going to be impactful for the team?
Understanding what's the job, right? Like I think we go back there over and over and over and over again, is that you have to understand what is the job that you want to fill. You have to understand how does the day-to-day look like. You need to think about the expectations from that successful hire in the, not just like the 30, 90 day window, but what Gus was saying, the 12 months, the 24-month window. Define the day-to-day and do the assessment. Like, does it actually measure that what you need? If you need someone to be proficient in X, measure proficiency. If you want someone to be able to work and deliver in a highly ambiguous, fast-paced environment with high pressure, then mimic that environment. Because someone can get a very, very good assessment score when they have 2 days to solve it, and they can do it in their quiet time at 8 p.m. in the evening when nobody bothers. And it's quite different to solve the same problem when you are maybe on a SEV1 call, you have 100 people on it, billions of dollars are going out every minute, and you're expected to write a problem to solve something. So define the problem really, really, really well, and your assessment needs to mirror that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So there's an interesting question in the chat that I want to pose to both of you, because this, I think, is popping up more and more, and it'll be a good segue as we start talking about AI tools. Jennifer Kloss said, recently, I've had a few candidates who appeared to be using AI to answer technical questions I've asked. Is anyone else seeing this, and any strategies for working around this?
I'll jump in here. Like TLDR, yes. I think we're seeing it everywhere, and everyone's seeing it, and it's like not going to go away. And I think Adam mentioned this earlier, right? It's just around like clearly defining upfront what that means for you as an organization, right? Like if you want to make sure that your people are if they're able to use AI on the job, how do you actually insert that into your interviewing processes and be like, hey, this is an appropriate time to go and use AI? And actually figure out how to do this. And this is an inappropriate time to go and use AI during your interviewing processes. I think like at the end of the day, what you want is transparency. What you want is just like a clear understanding on both sides, from an interviewer, an interviewee perspective, where it is appropriate, where it's not appropriate. And so figuring out a way to like proactively get in front of that, I think it's the only way at this point that we can get around it, because you're just going to have people who are going to bend the rules and are going to push the limits. And you have to kind of like, as an internal organization, have your own, for lack of a better word, like moral, ethical line right around like, all right, cool. This is what constitutes okay. And this is what doesn't constitute okay.
AI policies. I think that's, as Gus said, TLDR, yes, it's not going away. Depending on your perspective, this will become better or worse. That depends on where do you stand against that question. But yeah, create acceptable AI usage policies for your whole organization, not just talent acquisition. But this is a core problem these days in talent acquisition. So be very, very crisp and transparent and communicated ahead of what is okay from your perspective and what is off limits. If you say at the same time that, okay, AI usage is cool, like I would expect you to use AI in your day-to-day job, then somebody comes and solves your assessment using just AI and zero human critical thinking, then you need to go back to the drawing board and think about, like, do I need to hire for this position if AI can do that? Question number one. Question number two, am I doing the assessment correctly? Am I assessing the right skills in the right way if an AI agent can show up and complete my question perfectly without any human intervention? So think about the acceptable usage, and again, think back to how does good look like, and what behavior are you actually expecting in the day-to-day.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so we know that recruiters and hiring managers are leveraging AI-assisted tools to hire for technical roles. Actually, last year, over a third said that they are doing things like writing job descriptions, preparing interview questions, communicating with candidates, right? Sending cold prospect messages. How have you both seen recruiters utilizing these tools, and what have been some really good outcomes? Do you have an example of a really good outcome that you've seen coming from AI usage? And Adam, I'll start with you for this.
Role playing, especially when we go back to the high touch, wide glove approach. Let's be honest, there are some candidates out there that are maybe a little bit flaky, or there are candidates out there who are still in high demand and are maybe balancing many offers from various companies. Role playing that situation, that screening call with your AI tool helps a lot when you're actually on the call with the candidate. Same thing goes with the let's just say like high risk situations. Let's say you're an executive recruiter and you are preparing for a closing call. Or you're just not even an executive recruiter. You are just a recruiter preparing for a closing call with any candidate. How to sell that candidate, how to sell that offer, how to negotiate, how to do the offer negotiation. Like, the candidates will come prepared. The good ones will have all the tools available, and maybe they already did that role play with an AI recruiter to squeeze as much money out of you. So do the same thing. I'll be transparent. It helped me a lot. Like role-playing situations, when it's about human interactions, we say that, oh, AI cannot mimic humans. It can. It can really, really, really well. So use that to your advantage.
I love that. I've never done that, but I'll be telling my team. So two things. One, like, I tell my team, like, I expect 100% of you to be using AI to help you get your job better and like do your job better. And so, like, the fact that only 38% of recruiters and TA people are using, AI tools, like, is way low from my perspective. Like, we should be leveraging this. This is a crazy tool to make us all more efficient and like figuring out different ways to do it. Best way I've seen it used actually goes back to what we were talking about with skill-based hiring. It's building rubrics. It's building out different like job interviewing processes, and actually like the hard work of sitting down and being like, all right, what does good look like? and letting AI like at least get you 70% of the way there. Cause that's usually the hardest part, is just like starting the process. Like, hey, I have a 4-point scale. I want to know what really good looks like for an engineer who's got this much years of experience. And then like, you can use that to like tune it a little bit and then send it to your partner, your hiring partner. And they're like, oh my God, Amy, amazing work. Like, I can't believe you pulled this all together. And like, it just levels you up and allows you to do those things quicker that normally would have taken like weeks of meetings and like all these stuff to get to the point where you feel like you have something that you can share. And I think that like leveraging it for things like that is like such a good way to do it. The other thing I've seen it really well used for is this is a very obvious one, is just like kind of non-traditional job descriptions, right? Like we hire a bunch of really interesting roles here at Alchemy, like in the Solidity world, the Rust engineering world, like some languages and things that like candidly, like I'm not very familiar with, and like would take me a long time to get up to speed. And if I want to write a job description or get something out the door on that, or like think about different ways to like go and like source these people, like AI just knows it, right? Like they just know where to go, or they know what repos are out there, or they know what languages are similar to Rust right off the bat, and can tell you what you can include in there if you're looking for non-traditional candidates. And I think it's just like an easy way to like, again, to go from zero to one and some knowledge, or just like general processes or anything that you need to do in your day-to-day just to get started and like start that fire on a project or a thing that you're doing in your day-to-day.
I think that's 0 to 1. Like that is the big force enabler over there, like starting.
Yes.
Like, will AI handle end-to-end every question in your process? Not today. Give it a bit of time, but not today, at least not perfectly. But with the correct priming and right prompting, you can get some very, very, very good outputs, regardless of the step in the process from the tool. So use AI to fill the gaps that you have, right? Recruiters are doing a lot of candidate outreach and candidate conversations where they quote unquote need to sell, right? Like they need to sell the company, the job, the offer, the location, the RTO, you name it. But a lot of recruiters are good at sales and are good at marketing, but not everyone is. So one good usage is like, Gus, you mentioned like job descriptions and job ads. Like use AI for that, but don't be the type of recruiter who just types in the title into LinkedIn and hits search. But be more sophisticated than that. Like you can use some very basic stuff. Like here is one I'm reading out from my my AI tool over here. One of the starting prompts. You're an experienced web marketing and copywriting professional who specializes in recruiting and talent acquisition sectors. You have a solid understanding of SEO, content marketing, copywriting that drives conversions. Help me write a good converting job ad, message, reach out, post, you name it. Use copywriting best practices, frameworks, all that. Like the things that as a recruiter, you maybe don't know. The things that give that, that 1% edge, because maybe an AI tool doesn't give you a 10, 20, 50% boost, but it gives you 1 to 2% at many, many, many steps. That adds up. That compounds and adds up pretty fast.
This is a really silly one, but we rolled out a referral bonus program for the first time in Alchemy this year, and ChatGPT wrote 80% of it for us. Like it was just like, it's like that's a small thing. Like would it take me a couple hours to write? It's not a big deal, but it literally took me 15 minutes to write because I used a tool like that. And like to Adam's point, you don't want to be the lazy person who just like slaps it out there once it kind of comes off the press. But to get you going and get you a good chunk of the way there on most of this stuff, like AI can give you a huge leg up.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to get there and what to ask, one of the secret tricks is ask the AI. Like ask the AI to give you the prompt. Anthropic has a tool for this, the prompt writer. It's a free tool where and any chat bot can do this, where you describe the problem that you're solving and tell it like, hey, I'm setting up a chatbot that will do this for me. What are the requirements? Or put on your recruiting hat and say like, oh, I'm hiring a person who will do this for me. What should I look for in this person? What qualifications this person should have? Ask the AI to tell that and copy that, open up a new window and say, you are pasted in you prime your bot and ask your next question and give the data that you're allowed to give it and see what comes out. Will it be perfect at first try? No, but it sure will get you from 0 to 1 pretty fast. You can get it to give you more than one result. Like that is another small hack is don't just ask for one output, ask for 10. And then ask it, how should you rate the outputs? What is important? Then ask it to rate it. Ask it to make it better based on those stuff. Suddenly the quality of your outputs will skyrocket pretty fast. So you don't need to know what you need. You just need to know how to get there. And ask that and use as much help as you can get from those tools and just keep an eye on it. Don't trust it blindly.
So good. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like prompt rating is a skill unto itself, and that's a really good point. Thank you for that. Okay. So one thing that we know is that recruiters and engineers both agree on the fact that live coding interviews are one of the most effective ways to assess a candidate's skills. Giving this method basically an average score of like 3.76 out of 5, right? So that's pretty high. Technical tests with practical coding questions also tend to appeal to everyone. How are you both thinking about kind of refining those methods in 2025, right? Like right now, we have kind of a typical one-to-one mentality where we need to do a live coding assessment. We need an interviewer in the room to do that. Is there any thought process around how to like increase efficiency, I think, around our interview process in that way?
Who wants to go first?
I can take it, Adam. So I think we've talked a little bit about some of this already, but let's go deeper on it. So a couple examples that I've done in the past is like really trying to make these, like if they're take-home tests, really trying to make them like personalized and specific to your company or specific to like what the skills are that you're looking for. So at HubSpot, and again, this is like we had a bunch of resources. We actually built our own take-home test and actually like worked against a live HubSpot API and was actually like specifically around like some data that you might manipulate in your day-to-day job as a HubSpot engineer. So you actually had to write the code and actually hit the HubSpot API and actually deliver that code. And you had like a whole bunch of things that were specific to what we were doing. People really liked it because it had a little bit of like, it wasn't just like some out of the box, like, kind of a test that you might get out, from like a leak in like a leak code style. And so I think that's like number one. The other thing that we've done too is because like we really do believe in like the actual one-to-one relationship that comes out of solving a technical problem together at Alchemy. So we haven't gone too far away from that from like a take-home test perspective. We're still very small, keep in mind, but at the same time, like we really believe that that's one of our major selling points. So we're leaning into that. But the way that we're leaning into that is actually by not asking specific questions that are like, again, like these classic leak code style questions. They're more so like, hey, let's like refactor some code together or bring some work that you've done in the past and actually like give me a 20-minute presentation on how you thought about building this entire project and what actually did you work your way through. And that again, like makes it more real world. It makes it more something that they would actually do in their day-to-day job. At the end of the day, when they're coming on the onsite, we're still probably going to have them write a little bit of code, and we still do have algorithms and data structures as part of our interviewing process because we haven't fully worked that out of it. But like it no longer is like the barrier to entry, right? It is like much more of a welcoming kind of like, how do we get to the bottom of like what are the core skills that we really care about up front? And those skills are much more around communication, technical things, hard technical challenges that you've delivered in the past. How do you work with other key people internally? How do you read and write code? Are really critical skills that we like try to measure up front. And so kind of shifting that on its head a little bit, instead of going for these like leak code skills up front, really kind of changing it to more of like a custom solution or something that like kind of like embodies who you are as a company and like what you want to kind of like put out there from a talent branding perspective too in the beginning of the process.
That's great. Anything to add on to that, Adam?
Make it as appealing to your candidate as much as possible, because like put yourself in their shoes. Like, and that's an advice just in general for anyone hiring. Put yourself in the candidate's shoes. Go and hit that apply button with the dummy account on your own jobs and see what happens and go through the process. But put yourself in the shoes of the candidate and say, like, would I want to do this? If I'm a candidate and I have 10 other interviews because I'm like actively looking for a role, would I want to complete this when I see the company sending me this test? Or I would say like, not again, one of these, like, leave me alone. So in order to get there, like, think about what sort of tools or methods or tricks you can use to make it good for the candidate. Like, one is give them as much freedom as possible, right? Like, if you're looking for somebody to solve problems by writing code, like, don't limit your platform to only accepting code written in Rust or Python or Java, like, you name it. You can say that, hey, our code base is X, Y, and Z. You can solve your problem in whatever language you want. But if we hire you and you come in, this is our tech stack. But give them that freedom. Like, if you are just looking for someone who can write solutions for your problems, then create an assessment that is language agnostic. Try to make it fun. Do not copy lead code, and pretty please do not ask engineers anymore to rank dinosaurs based on their sort arrays, based on their size or anything like that. Like, forget all questions, but try to make it fun, right? Like, gamify it if you can. In the past, we had this, I think, horrible hiring practice called assessment centers. I don't know if you all remember those. Maybe we can bring them back somehow and just call them a hackathon, right? Maybe you create a hackathon where you mimic a situation that is in product development or problem solving in your day-to-day. You invite people, it's fun for them, they play, you can observe them behaving in the situation that they need to solve in the real life. And who knows, maybe later on you can approach them with an actual, like, hey, do you want to work for us? Let's complete this assessment because you had fun in our hackathon. So I know it's hard, but try to make it enjoyable, because if people like doing something, if they have fun doing something, they will think, hopefully correctly, that your day-to-day environment is like that as well. And who doesn't want to work for a fun place?
Yeah, I love that. I'm hearing consistent themes from both of you, which I think is like, let's remember that we're going to hire dozens, hundreds, thousands of people over the course of a year, right? A candidate is likely only going to make one job change over the course of a year, right? It is literally a bigger decision for them than it is for us. And we want to make sure that they have like insight into what it's actually like to do the job so that it's a really good match on both sides, right? And I love that approach. So thank you both for sharing that. Okay, we talked a little bit about return to office, and I want to dive into remote work a little bit. So we have kind of mixed opinions from the data. We have close to a third of developers which say remote options are a top priority. People like the flexibility. We do have a small percentage, about 10%, say that it's one of the more challenging aspects of their work to work remotely. So how have you seen employers kind of improve the remote and hybrid work experience for engineers? And, how are they managing through, like, this is a priority, but also a challenge? Gus, I'll start with you.
Yeah, unique situation here at Alchemy. We're actually a very much like mostly on-site company. As you can see, I'm working remotely, but like most people work in office like 3 to 4 days a week in Alchemy, and so like we have a very specific policy on that, being in New York and San Francisco, and making sure that folks are coming to the office on a regular basis. So like, how do we incentivize them to actually want to come to the office, right? Like, there's so many of these return to office policies that really are like, oh, everyone come back to the office, and they don't enforce them, or there's nothing there at the office, and they get there and like, why am I sitting here for, all these hours of the day when like none of my coworkers are here, or no one's actually showing up, or no one's actually following that. So at Alchemy, really thought about like building that in-office experience to make people feel like, one, they're getting something out of it by going to the office, but two, they're actually spending that quality time. And I think if people like, despite how flexible work from home is, like, do miss like spending time with your coworkers and actually like having those water cooler conversations. And how do we incentivize that by setting up our offices in a certain way, or having team lunches, or even having like off hours things, and having always those things available to folks who can attend those, or having things, you know, during the work hours that other folks can attend that who can't maybe attend the things off hours. And so we really thought critically about that specific experience, you know, at Alchemy overall. But it does make it more difficult, right? Like, there's a lot of people who are like, no, I only want a full-time remote role, or I have to make sure that I'm working from home, you know, the majority of the time, where it really shrinks down your kind of talent market that you can go after from a people perspective, and who you can actually like go out and target. So again, when you're considering this or thinking about this, like, it really is just about like who you are as an organization, what you can do, and making sure that like you're catering that experience to folks who actually that actually is an attractive experience, versus like just putting the lip service out there to say that like, oh yeah, we're having a great time in the office, and they get there and there's like no one there doing any sort of fun things.
You know, there is no good answer to this. I think the answer to this question is always depends. So develop listening mechanisms, develop feedback loops into which your workforce can give you feedback and actually listen, right? Like, oh, they want to work remote, but like, we don't care. Like, actually listen to your employees, and build for them. Like, invest in developer relations, invest in developer tools. Again, try to make it fun. Try to keep your workforce happy. Who's on top always varies. Like we say, like, oh, this is a candidate-driven market, or is it a employer-driven market? It will vary time to time, year to year, domain to domain, right? So regardless of which position you are in, listen to the needs, and don't just create something for the sake of being able to say that, oh, we are remote. Saying that we are remote, but the only difference between being in office is that I'm not in the office, I'm sitting in front of a screen at home. That's not true remote. Like, you need to build the processes, the frameworks around your day-to-day operations that support that remote workforce, that bring in the intentionality into your day-to-day. We say that like, oh, productivity is better because we have those connections. We have the water cooler chats. We are able to meet face to face, and we cannot do that remotely. Whenever I hear that, is that my question is, so what did you do to build that out in a remote space? What did you change? Because moving from on-site to remote is also not just moving where you sit, just moving your screen into your own home, right? Same thing goes with like hybrid. A lot of times folks say that like, oh, hybrid is that we are like 2 days in the office. No, that's not hybrid. That is running two different setups in parallel. Going into an office and sitting in a conference room and being on a Zoom call is not in office work, right? So build the environment that gives the same experience, regardless if you're remote or on site, and supports you if you're not close or you're not in the same time zone or same location. But listen to the problems and don't hear those as problems. Hear those as opportunities to keep your workforce happy.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Adam. I know we are basically at time, so I want to thank you both so much for your time today. I was taking notes as you were talking, so I have a lot of good ideas out of this. Thank you so much.
I think we should try to get to that last topic if we can. We apologize for running over, but there is kind of one last category of the evolving candidate expectations. So let's try to get one question in from there. Amy, I'll let you take the lead, but we are running out of time, so I wanted to be mindful of that. That's why I came back on camera.
Sure. Yeah, we'll be tight around this. So as we think about candidate expectations, one thing that we see is that developers say that kind of salary, work-life balance, remote working are really their most important considerations, and in that order. how have you seen candidates' priorities evolve in 2024, and what should companies start to anticipate in 2025? Adam, I'll start with you.
Candidates, during COVID, we all learned what we like, and we all learned that some things are possible, right? So one thing that changed is that more candidates became more vocal around their needs, and having less flexibility around that. It's like, hey, you want to hire me? I need either X salary or remote work or whatnot, but it's not just, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who are just give me a job, but at the same time, candidates know what is possible. And candidates know now through using AI tools of how to look good on paper, right? Like we see recruiting organizations and recruiters being overwhelmed by perfectly crafted AI resumes that look as a perfect match. More of that will come. So candidates started to learn what they can get and how to quote unquote look good, how to look as the perfect match. And I think there will be more and more and more candidates looking false positives, if that makes sense. So from an assessment standpoint, you need to up your game to see those, and well, filter in or filter out. It's up to you. But I don't think that we are at the step where, let's say, you get 1,000 applicants and only maybe 50 or 100 look like you want to talk to them. I think that percentage will go higher and higher and higher and higher. Are those candidates actually really good? Now that's why you have the assessment.
I have two quick things to add in so we can all get back on time. But like one, I think I'm seeing shifts in all of these different sections, right? So across salary, across work-life balance, across remote work, and the preference for all those things. So two things to call out. Like one, in the compensation side of things, we're definitely seeing a shift away from like people betting on privately held companies or betting on the equity or betting on those types of things, and being more cash conscious and thinking about like, cool, I need to get paid at the top of my band, or I need to get paid more cash than I'm at right now because I have a home, I have a mortgage, I have all these sorts of things. And we're definitely seeing that shift a little bit. And I think there's just like a macroeconomic kind of like push against that from like a privately held companies, even publicly held companies. People aren't as high as maybe like 2015, 2017, 2020 on like privately or publicly held equity as they were then. And so like they're optimizing more for cash. The second thing that I'm seeing is like, I think people really care more now than they maybe have ever before about like meaningful work. And especially in the age of AI, like especially in the age of like company, like people like really, hey, I have to spend so much time working, right? Like I want to work on something that's going to like change the world. I want to work on something that's actually like in my, like what I care about. Like Adam said, like I actually learned what I really like. I want to work in climate tech. I want to work in, I want to work in environmental stuff. I want to work in crypto. I want to work in AI. I have to work in those industries or else I just don't care. And like, I think we're seeing a big shift in that where candidates are like, oh, very hyper-focused on like working on the things that they care the most about.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Amy, thank you for moderating this excellent conversation. Adam and Gus, thank you so much for joining us. To everybody that tuned in, thanks for your continued support of this program. And I couldn't stop without thanking CoderPad for making this presentation possible. So big thank you to our friends over at CoderPad. For those of you out in the audience that want to get involved in our programming, we're always looking for great speakers. If you're not ready to be a speaker, but you have a topic in mind, we want to bring you the materials that you need to succeed. So just let us know the type of topics you want to learn about. And without any further ado, we're going to draw this to a close. We will see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you. See you all next time.